It's January 2007. In a crowded convention center, Steve Jobs holds up a sleek glass rectangle and says, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." The audience erupts in applause. Meanwhile, 500 miles away in Canada, inside a corporate boardroom at BlackBerry, two men, Mike Lizardis and Jim Balsillie, watch the announcement on a small TV. When the presentation ends, one executive smirks and says, "That's not a business phone. No keyboard, no security, no chance." They laugh, and in that moment, they sealed their fate. Because the iPhone didn't just reinvent the phone, it destroyed the empire that thought it couldn't be replaced. This is how BlackBerry died of pride. Welcome to Missed Billions Explained, where we dive into the biggest business failures, billion-dollar mistakes, and how arrogance turns success into history. If you enjoy stories of innovation, disruption, and downfall, hit subscribe because this is one of the greatest corporate tragedies of the modern era. Before Apple, before Android, there was BlackBerry. In the early 2000s, if you owned a BlackBerry, you were untouchable. It was more than a phone. It was a status symbol. It buzzed with power, literally. The little red blinking light meant you were important. Emails from work, messages from clients, the heartbeat of business, all in your hand. Wall Street loved it. Governments trusted it. Even the President of the United States used one. Barack Obama once said he refused to give his up because it was the most secure communication device on Earth. BlackBerry's encryption and instant email made it the gold standard of mobile communication. It wasn't just popular, it was addictive. They called it the crackberry. At its peak, BlackBerry controlled over 50% of the US smartphone market and had 80 million active users worldwide. Everyone wanted one, and inside the company, they believed they'd already won the future. BlackBerry's founders, Mike Lizardis and Jim Balsillie, were visionaries, but they were also stubborn. They believed deeply in their mission, that a phone was a tool for professionals, not a toy for the masses. Their entire brand identity was built on security, keyboards, and reliability. Typing on a BlackBerry was fast, precise, and satisfying, the click of success. When engineers proposed new ideas like touchscreen devices or app stores, executives brushed them off. They'd say things like, "Our users don't want games, they want emails. We're not a toy company, we're a serious tool." That mindset worked until the world changed. When Apple announced the iPhone in 2007, BlackBerry's leadership dismissed it immediately. To them, it was ridiculous. A fragile screen, no keyboard, no security features, and a battery that barely lasted a day. They laughed at Apple's optimism, but they misunderstood what the iPhone really was. It wasn't a phone. It was a computer disguised as one. Apple wasn't competing on hardware. It was changing what people expected from a phone entirely. Apps, internet browsing, photos, music, and design. Things BlackBerry thought were distractions became the very definition of a smartphone. And while BlackBerry was busy protecting their reputation, Apple was building an entire digital lifestyle. The world was moving toward touchscreens and consumer experiences, not corporate firewalls. BlackBerry wasn't just behind, they were in denial. Inside BlackBerry, engineers knew they needed to adapt. They begged leadership to pivot toward touchscreens and app ecosystems, but management refused. When they finally tried to launch their own touchscreen phone, the BlackBerry Storm, it was a disaster. The touchscreen clicked when you pressed it, trying to mimic the feel of a keyboard, but it was slow, buggy, and frustrating. Reviewers called it a failure wrapped in good intentions. Even loyal users started leaving. But instead of focusing on innovation, BlackBerry doubled down on what had worked before. New models with better keyboards, stronger encryption, and more buttons. Meanwhile, Apple was evolving every year. Android manufacturers flooded the market with affordable options. And slowly, quietly, BlackBerry's grip began to slip.
By 2010, the smartphone world looked completely different. Apple had launched the App Store, Google had Android running on dozens of phones. Developers were creating entire ecosystems of software and games. BlackBerry tried to fight back with BlackBerry 10, a new operating system that was sleek and modern. But by the time it arrived, it was too late. No one was building apps for them anymore. Developers were focused on iOS and Android, where the users and the money were. BlackBerry's App Store felt empty. Its software felt outdated. Its users felt left behind. In just 5 years, the company went from market leader to afterthought. At its peak, BlackBerry was worth over $80 billion. By 2013, that valuation had dropped by more than 90%. The once unstoppable giant was bleeding relevance. Their phones, once symbols of status, became symbols of resistance, people who refused to move on. When BlackBerry finally opened its system to Android apps, the ecosystem had already passed them by. Even government contracts, once their strongest base, began to vanish as competitors matched their security. By 2016, BlackBerry stopped making phones altogether. They licensed the brand name to other companies, the ultimate sign that the empire was gone. The phone that changed business was out of business. So what if BlackBerry had embraced change instead of fighting it? They had everything Apple didn't in 2007: global market share, trust, infrastructure, and experience. If they'd leaned into innovation instead of fear, they could have evolved into something bigger. Imagine if BlackBerry had merged its legendary security with the touchscreen world. If it had created its own app ecosystem, its own digital services, its own vision of the smartphone future. They had the resources, they had the technology. What they lacked was humility. They didn't lose because they couldn't innovate. They lost because they wouldn't admit that someone else had done it better. Pride blinded them, and pride always collects its debt. BlackBerry's downfall is one of the purest examples of corporate arrogance in history. They didn't fail because they didn't see the future. They literally held it in their hands. They just refused to believe the future could be different from their past. Innovation doesn't reward legacy, it rewards adaptability. The world doesn't care who did it first, only who did it right. Just like Kodak buried the digital camera, BlackBerry buried the touchscreen. Both companies mistook their dominance for immortality. But technology doesn't respect tradition. It respects evolution. When BlackBerry died, it wasn't just the end of a brand. It was the end of an era. The era of physical keys, of blinking red lights, of emails as status. It was the sound of the world shifting from productivity to experience. Today, a few nostalgic fans still cling to their old devices. They remember the click of the keys, the feel of power, the elegance of being connected before everyone else. But the truth is simple. BlackBerry didn't lose to the iPhone. They lost to themselves. Because when you build your empire on control, the hardest thing to face is change. Thanks for watching Missed Billions Explained. If you enjoyed the story, hit like, subscribe, and tell us which corporate downfall you want next. Because somewhere out there, another giant company is laughing at its competition, and they have no idea that the laughter is the sound of their own ending.